this recording in progress, and you can have access to that recording should you want it. So the purpose of this is to bring focus and your attention to the idea of the will, of inspiration, of drive, any of those words, motivation we can use here, because I think it's very much overlooked or taken for granted in the world of coaching. And in my recent work, it's proving to be a significantly important thing in helping people achieve what they say they want to achieve. And so I've been doing more work on that in the last few years. And this is about one, kind of showing you why this is, why the will, why inspiration, drive are important. Two, about giving you some tools that you can use for yourself, but probably for most of you, more importantly, are tools that you can use with the people that you're working with, coaching, mentoring, whatever. So that's kind of the scene, and how I'll take us through this presentation and webinar is I will set the scene. So I'll talk a little bit about the enabling genius idea. That's to make sure everybody's on the same page. That won't get much attention, and then I'll start taking you into some kind of formational ideas around will and motivation, just so that we're all talking about the same thing. And that will then bring us into 2 or 3 tools which I found to be particularly useful with my clients and colleagues. So that's where that's the broad part of it. Those tools, one in particular, will slow the pace down and let you and take you through it. We'll still be doing it very fast by comparison with how we do it if we were doing it with a client. But I'm having looked through the list, I know the people who are here for the most part, if you get the idea, you'll be able to use this in the real world. If not, give me a call. But I'm trying to give you tools that you can use out there. So we'll slow that one in particular down so you can have a go, and the others we'll take a little bit quicker. Not so quick that you won't get them. And I don't quite know exact. I've tried to work out the timeline, but every time I do it, it turns out differently. So we'll see how we go. My intention is to keep it tight and give you as much valuable stuff as I can. And then as we get towards 6 o'clock, we'll loosen up and we can turn it into more of a conversation. And if you want to stay beyond 6 o'clock, I'll be here for another 10, 15 minutes or whatever, in order that we can have whatever conversation we want to have. That said, if something occurs during the webinar and you want to ask a question, it's difficult. I have to do that. To see the chat, and that's irritating. So I will do that. I will stop and do that. But feel free to ask a question. So don't put your hand up. Turn your microphone on and stop me and say, Miles, I've got this question, or I've got this idea. So as long as we don't want to get stuck in that in the first bit. At the end, I'm going to tell you also kind of 3 minutes to 6, I'm running a workshop here in London for a small number of people, 12 to 16 people, where I'm going, the intention is it's about coaching in flow. So it's about excellence. It's, and how it will work is that that group of people will be with me on a tennis court. And we'll go through some principles that come from Tim Galway's Inner Game and the work that I've done to develop that will help you see how you can access what Galway called natural learning, the other individual's capacity to learn for themselves, so that they learn. So we'll do that on the tennis court, and you'll actually end up coaching people on the tennis court. What's important about that is it helps you make distinctions about how you lead people when you're coaching and teach, rather than how you help them learn. So if we can create that really solid base, that's a really, really useful thing to have, because you can coach anybody on anything. but it also then releases you into a state of flow where you do your best coaching. So the kind of the second objective is, how do I get myself into a state of flow as the coach? How do I get the person I'm coaching into a state of flow? Because they'll do their best learning, imagining, whatever else there, problem solving. So morning on the tennis court, afternoon in a more workshop type session where you'll integrate what's been learned into the morning into your coaching practice. So I'll just flag that up again, and we'll be sending out information about that later. So enough about that. Introductory stuff, and then into some exercises which are going to be fun and useful. So I need to share my screen so that people can see the slides that I have. I hate this minute because my fear is that they've disappeared into the ether and will never be seen again. But no, here are the slides, and I'm going to take you to. So I just want to remind you and others of what I'm calling genius. So this isn't what the dictionary says genius is. This is what I and the people on the Enabling Genius research project came to. And the understanding of genius is merely a device, a construct to help people explore the outer reaches of their potential. So kind of like we defined it in that context, I defined it in that context, I get to then say how I understand genius and how I use it. So the words in red are the critical ones. And I really like the opening two sentences here, that genius is the embodiment of your unique potential. And the second bit, it's what you make of what you were born with. And that's kind of both the challenge and the excitement. And what it also says, it's about making that real in the world. It's about the innate abilities of each and every individual and the uninhibited expression of those resources. The other thing about genius is that it's a commitment. It's about giving yourself a challenge every day and in everything you do to do your best. And the final bit is about inhabiting your own authority, your own autonomy to be self-actualizing. So genius encompasses those ideas, and the four pillars some of you have seen before. Identity is about if you don't know who you are, it's really hard to show up. It's kind of obvious when I say it like that. So I help people understand what their identity is. Very often it's helping people understand their identity as a leader. Sometimes working in sport, it's helping people understand their identity in the field of sport. And an example that I would use drawing on sport is that if I take two legendary tennis players of the last 2 decades, Nadal and Federer, what you'll notice about them is that they both play the same game, but they play it in completely different ways. So they have a really clear grasp of what their identity is on the tennis court and how that shows up. And when I say shows up, I mean, what are their tactics? What are their strategies? What are their behaviors that allow them deliver on that genius and get the results they get? And most leaders don't know that. Most leaders just do what they think leaders do, or what the previous leader they had, or the first leader they had, or they look to, Churchill, God forbid. And so it's about really getting to the authenticity of who are you as a leader, or who are you as a snooker player or craftsperson that you are. So identity. Then we have you had the word. Some of you may recall desire in here, and somebody gave me the word inspiration a few weeks ago, for which I say thank you. And I like that better. But it's also about, that's the topic we're talking today. That's about will, mindset. Mindset has become, we had it, some of you attended the webinar a few weeks ago, and what's becoming clear about helping people understand what their mindset is and play with their mindset. This is the point where the rubber hits the road, to take the cliche. This is how everything shows up in day-to-day life and translates the dreams into reality. It's about it's being at the coalface every day. So hugely more important than I think even I realized when I was writing this originally. And at the center of these is the notion of learning. And learning in this case means that everything is a process. Everything is a process. It's about how you move things on, continually develop. That's the process I mean. So my identity when I was 20, when I was 40, when I'm 62, they're different. They evolve, they emerge, and they change according to context. The things that inspire me and my will change and develop. And will, if you think of it in those terms, is a muscle that I can build. So I can learn to be more willful, and equally mindset. I can learn what works for me, change and adapt. So those are the four things. We're focused on the inspiration one. And kind of here, I'm going to take you into motivation or will 101 with the next slide, which is to make an important distinction that you're already aware of, but it needs to be on the page. The different distinction and difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Deci, who was the guy referred to in Dan Pink's book called Drive, who did some very work in the 1940s and 50s on human motivation, on drive. So intrinsic motivation, the motivation that comes from within, frequently defined as it is here, doing something for the inherent reward, the pleasure of doing that task. Extrinsic motivation, doing something driven by external reward, pressure, or punishment. And the point about this is that extrinsic reward, although it is prevalent in our society in the ways in which we reward people in the place of work, the reality is that long-term, it doesn't work. It works in two ways in particular, extrinsic reward, where people are doing dull, repetitive tasks. A regular reward can keep them engaged to a certain degree. And the other place it works is in rewarding yourself just to kind of get the buzz of feeling good, or rewarding a colleague to give them the buzz of feeling good. But the message is that that extrinsic reward ultimately erodes interest interest and the intrinsic motivation. So all of what we're going to go to here is really about that intrinsic motivation. And I'm taking you back to a place, the work of Assagioli, psychosynthesis. When I was preparing for this, I went back to some core material, and this completely inspired me. So he talked about will, and he referred to the inner resources of man. He does. His book was written a long time ago, so he does talk about man in what's now an old-fashioned way to cover both sexes. So I can't apologize for him, but we can acknowledge that the world has moved on, and I'm not going to change his words. The tremendous unrealized potential of a man's own will. Its training and use constitute the foundation of all endeavors. That's a really big statement. Constitute the foundation of all endeavors. There are two reasons for this. The first is will's central position in man's personality and its intimate connection with the core of his being, his very self. So he's saying that drive, that will, sits side by side with the self. So in my three circles, with the four pillars, you'll see will, in my case, I called it inspiration, and identity overlapping, so that there's a profound connection. And the second lies in the will's function deciding what is to be done, in applying all the necessary means for its realization, and in persisting in the in the tasks in the face of all obstacles and difficulties. So he's underlying what I said earlier, which is my own increasing understanding and awareness that if I don't work on will with the people that I'm coaching, that I'm less likely to help them achieve what they're dreaming of. So that's the place that's kind of the scene setting part of the conversation. Oh, sorry, two further ideas. My apologies. There's some of you may have heard about a guy called Lewis Pugh. he's a swimmer, and he swims in conditions that nobody else could swim in. So in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, in freezing cold conditions. He has a mission. His mission is to raise awareness of the plight of the planet. So that goes with it. But I was introduced to a piece of work that somebody had done on how he motivates himself. And what I learned from it is that it's not just one single thing. So it's not just this brave mission that's motivating him to, the raising awareness about the state of the planet. There's connections that go back to his father. There's the music that he plays. There's the challenge of the swim itself. So he's using numerous things to create the drive, the will necessary for him to do stupid things like get into water that would kill the rest of us. It would kill you because when you go into water that cold, the body's initial response is to take in large quantities of air. But if you're in water, that doesn't work, so you drown. So you get why. So he had to train to overcome that reflex. I mean, just extraordinary. Point though is it brings me to mind when I was very young. I obviously did something silly, and I made a series of excuses for my silly activity or my naughty activity. And my father said to me afterwards, he said, "Listen," he said, if you want to make an excuse, just make one excuse. It's easier to communicate, and people will buy it more easily." And I thought this was terribly wise, and it kind of feeds into some part of the human psyche that wants there to be a solution for everything, whereas it's not the reality. There are multiple causes, multiple reasons, multiple excuses. So my point here is that that will is a bundle. It's not just one thing. And anything you can do to create the drive, the inspiration from the grandiose, save the planet, to the intrinsic pleasure of just swimming, or the inspiration that a piece of music would give you, then bring them all together. Use every lever you can find to generate the inspiration, the will, the drive to help people achieve the outcomes. So that's second last message. Will isn't one thing; it's a bundle. And the next one is that if we start thinking in more practical terms, more immediate terms, and I start thinking of the people who you might be coaching or you yourself. And the title of our webinar is the will to succeed. What's really important is that context is understood. So you're not doing this in a vacuum. You're doing this in the context around somebody's life. So you have to do all the work that a good coach would do to understand what success looks like, what it is and what it looks like. So you define it in probably fairly concrete terms in what it is, and then the next one is in more tangible terms. There's a technique which is when somebody describes a goal, you might ask them how when you're successful in achieving that goal, what will you see? So you plug into the different channels through which people interact with the world. What will you see? What will you feel? What will you hear? What will you hear yourself saying about your success? What will you hear other people saying about your success? So what will you see, hear, and feel? And in terms of my bundle, that's another part of my bundle. You define what success is in the context, and you go through the routine of see, hear, and feel. Particularly the feel one, feel in the emotional sense. Emotion and motivation have the same root in Latin, motivare, to move. So your emotions and motivation are very closely related. So that's just another piece. So if you're going to go in and do this work, to repeat myself, you have to be clear about the context, what success is, and what it looks like, feels like, sounds like for the person that you're working with. So that's kind of the scene is set. So let me just stop for a moment and just check in and to see. On the chat has gone away as I moved into full screen, so I'm not going to come out of here. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask at this point, or an observation to make? So unmute yourself and say hello, or And if I haven't heard within 10 seconds, I'll keep on going. Okay, we'll have plenty of time towards the end to so next slide. Oh, that's not the one I want to go to. We'll come back to direction of travel. So direction of travel is the way in which I talk to people about what it's the intention is to get to purpose, to what inspires them, what motivates them, and because it's closely linked to, as I said, purpose, but also goals and things that are meaningful. And it's an exercise that I take, which is comes from in part from a colleague, Cliff Kimber, who is the first question he asks people when he meets them, pretty much, which is to say, so what's your direction of travel? And I'm reminded of a spiritual, a hymn, where the opening line is well, the Lord looked down from his window in the sky, said, I created man, but I can't remember why. There's been nothing but fighting since creation day. I'll send a little water and wash them all away. But it's the opening line, the Lord looked down from his window in the sky. Now, I'm not a particularly religious person, but it's the sense of that abstraction from and getting a person to stand back from their life, looking down at themselves from a window in the sky. And the exercise has 4 steps to it. It's about kind of raising awareness of where you are now, where you're going to, and what you've got that will get you there. There's another version of that 4th picture, which is what might stop you. So you as the coach will make a decision as to which is going to be most useful for somebody in the moment as to that 4th picture, or have 5 pictures, whichever seems to work better for you. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to just slightly slow down and actually do this properly, because you can do this in 2 ways. You can do this in a fairly a practical everyday sense, where you can simply ask people the question and have them write down, or you write down their responses. But the most powerful way of doing this, there are 2 parts to it, and you don't have to deploy 2 parts. The first part is that you get the person you're working with into a relaxed state. So you ask them there are many ways of doing that. You sit down, watch your breathing, relax your muscle groups, starting with your feet and moving up, asking them to let those muscles relax, notice their breathing, and then take them into the exercise. So we would do some, and then in the exercise, what I would do, and do this if you feel comfortable doing it, if people don't feel comfortable closing their eyes, I ask them to look at the floor in front of them, just so that there's, so you limit the external intrusive information coming in. And you start with the first picture. There's an explanation you need to give, which I'm giving you now, which is that I'm going to ask you to allow an image to come for where you're coming from. And that people aren't always used to just trusting their imagination to give them an image. And believe me, if you trust it, it will. The piece that's important around that is that people don't dismiss the image that they're given. So on I was demonstrating this many years ago in front of a group of people, and a colleague was running this process on me, and the image that came to me was a garden gnome with a little fishing rod. Now, my instinct in front of the 30 people that I was working with was to kind of substitute something more sensible and more obvious, but I didn't. I went with the garden gnome, and it proved to be incredibly fruitful. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to get that image to come. What I do in a full workshop with people, I'd get them to paint a picture of the image. We're not going to do that here, but I'll give you a minute to write down any words that come to you before I move you on to the next picture. So this is about direction of travel, 4 pictures. The first one. So I'd just like you to just take a second and just relax. Notice your breathing, maybe close your eyes. And I'd like you to allow an image to come to you from where you are coming from. Could be from any point in your life, from right back to the earliest, to your teens, to your 20s, to maybe even a bit later, but it's typically in the earlier years. Allow an image to come from where you are coming from. Take the first image that your imagination gives you. Notice the feelings that that image brings up in you. And there may be some words that are attached to that image that you want to write down. Sometimes an image will be very concrete, a place. Sometimes it'll be an abstract, a symbol. And if you want to take a minute, then just write down whatever you need to write down.
Come on, you're obviously.
And I'm going to ask you to remove yourself from that place in the past, come back to being here with me in the present. And we're going to move to the second picture. And I'd like you just to consciously relax again, maybe just watch your breathing. Take a second or two to prepare. And I'd like you to allow an image to come for where you are now. Take the first image that you're given. It could be abstract or concrete and real. Notice whatever feelings the image brings up in you. You might want to look at the image from different perspectives. Turn it round. Feel it. And to see if there are any words that come with that image. What I'd like you to do now is to take a minute to make some notes about the image that came to you, what it might symbolize or mean, the feeling state, and the words that were attached to it. And I'd like you to come back into the Zoom space with me, and we'll move to the third picture. And I'd like you to, again, to take your time, relax, check in with your breathing, check in with your body. And then as you do that, allow an image to come for where you are now. Take the first image that your imagination gives you. Sorry, I got that wrong. Start again. So just take a breath and I'll take you back into it. Allow an image to come for where you are going to. Take the first image that you're given. Notice the feelings that brings up. Notice the image again. Look at it from different perspectives. The other side, the underside, from the top. Are there any words that are associated with that image for you? And take a minute to make a note of anything you need to, what the image signifies for you, what the words were, what the image was, of course. So just a minute to take some notes. And then to the final picture. So make yourself comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes. Check in with your body, check in with your breathing. Relax as much as you can. And then allow an image to come for what you've got that will get you to that future that you're going to. Again, take the first image that you're given. Notice it from different perspectives. Maybe you want to touch it, see what it feels like. Notice the feelings that it brings up in you. Are there any words that are attached to that image or symbol? And take a minute to make a note of what the image was, what it signifies, what you're taking from that part of the exercise. So I'm just taking a pause and checking in just to see if there's any observations, thoughts, or questions that anybody has would like to share. I see in the chat box from Valentina from Ukraine. It's wonderful to have you here. Given all that's going on, that you're making time to do this is just stunning. Thank you so much. You either put something into chat or unmute yourself and let me know how you're doing. Okay, great. So I've got it. This is superb. Thank you. And thought-provoking. Brilliant. Thank you. It's useful to know to get some feedback, so I know that I should keep on going and not just go and have a beer. So thank you. Very good. Okay. I'm with that in mind. Okay, great. Okay, great. I'll keep going. I'm going to take you into some more exercises. So that's the most useful thing I believe that I can do. And I need to go back into the screen share because I've got some stuff that's easily absorbed if it's seen. And my PowerPoint, share, and into that. And everything goes black. And then we move back one. So so this comes from Dan Pink. I've mentioned his book Drive. It's a really good, almost like a primer in the sense you kind of, it gives you lots of really well-researched, well put together information about drive, will, motivation. And he comes to the kind of beyond the kind of the thing that surprised people many years ago, which was that extrinsic motivation doesn't work, which is an overstatement. He came to the three things that were critical, which were AMP, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And there's a quote there at the bottom: human beings have an innate desire to be autonomous, self-determined, and connected to one another. When that drive is liberated, people achieve more and live richer lives. So I'm connecting, using his quote, these things and the idea of will and drive with results in the world. Whether the results are, kind of external, tangible things, or more internal, intrinsic reward, whatever else. So autonomy, if you look in the dictionary, you'll see is the power or right to self-govern. So my autonomy is and I use the word synonymously that sometimes with, which is authority, which is to have authority over oneself, the capacity to author, to produce things. So I would use those. He talks about mastery, supreme skill or knowledge. And then there's a book which is good, but a bit outdated, by a guy called Richard Sennett, The Craftsman. And what he's talking about is this very idea. And again, outdated because he has the word craftsman, not craftsperson, but I'm not in a position to change his writing. So craftsmanship names an enduring basic human impulse, the desire to do a job well for its own sake. And what happens is this links autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a very powerful way. And that sense of the intrinsic motivation that comes with that. You only get that if you are the master, again, a very male word, if you have supreme skill or knowledge in the craft of your choice. And then purpose, the last exercise, the 4 pictures touches on that. And one of the things that he refers to here in purpose is a purpose that's bigger than yourself. So if you can help people identify a purpose that's greater than themselves, they tend to collaborate better, be more creative. Lots of things emerge from that. The Lewis Pugh that I mentioned, the swimmer, the part of the motivation was saving the planet and bringing awareness about the state of the planet to people. I think I'm about to start work. I hope I'm about to start work with a housing association, and they are a bit disrupted and have become kind of engaged in the process of the work and have forgotten to some degree the tenants in their houses. And part of the work that I imagine we'll be doing, I'm hoping that we'll be doing, was reconnecting the leaders of that housing association with the tenants and understanding the vital, literally vital importance of helping these people have homes and maintaining the security of those homes. So those are really big ideas, and what strikes me is that all of those things are things that we can coach people on. So I have one activity that's useful in relation to all of these, but you can coach people on getting better at what they do. That's relatively straightforward. Slightly more difficult to coach people on autonomy, but it goes back to my earlier model of the four pillars and identity. If you don't know who you are, it's really difficult to show up. It's really difficult to stand in your own shoes. So understanding what your identity is in a particular context, a particular part or point in your life is really, really important. If I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but a few months ago, I gave my first live seminar, and the person who went before me was utterly brilliant. He was talking to small people who ran small businesses, and he was talking about marketing. And he really understood the world of small businesses. I was to go on after this guy, and I was just profoundly impressed by him and beginning to feel very diminished by his excellence. And you know, I work in large corporates, not small businesses. I don't understand the day-to-day grind of their lives. And I was speaking about meaningful things like genius and coaching. It's like, so I was, and I just heard my internal dialogue just as I was being introduced, because the guy was saying really positive things, nice things about me and what I'd done for him, as the guy introducing me. And I thought, you idiot. And what I did was I centered myself back in how I described myself, my identity as a presenter. I just reminded myself of that and the feeling state that I get with that. And I won't say that all doubt went away like that, but most of it did. And I turned to the group and I made my presentation and found my feet fairly quickly. So one way into the autonomy piece is helping with identity. There's another thing I'd like you to give you, and I get it from Tim Galway, the author of the Inner Game series of books, and it's in one of his books called The Inner Game of Work. And what he does is a really neat trick. He in order to raise people's awareness of themselves, he gets them to imagine themselves as a corporation, a legal business organization, a corporation. And he gets them to define the purpose of the corporation, the objectives of the corporation, the values of the corporation. So it's a lengthy exercise. But one of the things that he does towards the end of it really took me by surprise, because he said he kind of went through that more obvious bit, and then there was a pause, and he said, of course, a corporation has shareholders. And then he said, so who owns your shares? I thought, like, a huge image of my mother appeared. Oh. And it's like, so in other words, who have you sold out to? Who or what have you sold out to? Who owns shares in you? Now, some of those shares that you've sold out are sold to others. It's a really sensible thing to do. Occasionally, I've entered into business partnerships with people, and we do an exchange of shares. Brilliant. Be conscious of it. It's the ones that you're kind of not immediately aware of. They're the ones you need to be careful about. And then he said the thing where he said, he was making this up, but it's a good analogy. He said, if you still own one share in your own corporation, it gives you the right to buy the shares back. But you have to buy them back in the currency that you sold them in. So if I sold shares to my mother, I was born into a family of 7 children that tragically became 6 at one point. Getting my mother's attention was an important thing. So I sold shares to my mother in order to have my mother's attention. And I had to be willing to put my mother's attention and her blessing at risk in order to buy back those shares. So it's a really neat exercise. If you can't find it and don't want to buy the book, I'll send me an email and we'll get it to you somehow as an exercise you can do with people. So this is another places I wanted to stop along the way, was to go back into these are Dan Pink called these the fundamental drives that are fundamental to everybody. And those are things we need to be coaching people on, so that they are autonomous, masterful, purposeful people delivering results for themselves and the company that they work and the stakeholders who are around them. So that's another piece that I wanted to give you as being really, really important in helping people move forward. And just as a kind of an aside, but also, whereas I've always been very business focused as a coach, what I'm beginning to do is balance more powerfully that business focus with the desire to liberate people's genius, because they both work together. And if I get the balance right, where there's a really clear external goal from which other people benefit, and the coaching liberates, and this person liberates their genius and liberates them to inhabit their genius, then extraordinary things occur. And that balance has kind of come back into focus for me, or into focus for me in a different way. Where do we go next? We've done that, just to remind you. An eye to the clock. I've got 2 more things to do, and we'll go to another one first, which is an exercise which is about helping people get to a sense of meaning and purpose. And you may know this exercise, in which case I'm reminding you of something. And because I used to think this was a very trivial exercise, probably because I didn't do it very well, or because I'm some kind of an idiot. But it done well with care and patience. So I'm gonna get you to do this with me, but we'll just do it just once. So how this was presented to me was I was asked to imagine that through my life there was running through my life there was a purpose. And I was asked to accept that as a part of the exercise. So I was willing to accept that as part of the exercise. It was an experiment. What have I got to lose? And that positioning was actually really useful to just create some playfulness around it. And then the person I was working with said, okay, so what I'm also going to ask you to imagine is that every now and again, what you're doing, your actual life intersects with that purpose. So you'll have moments in your life when you are living your purpose. Okay, I could buy that. So the exercise is called Golden Moments. And the job is to help the person identify a number of golden moments across their life. And as I said, we'll do that in a second. And how this would work between me and the person I'm coaching is, I'd set it up, I get them to identify the golden moment, I get them to tell me about it, describe it, and I would probably write down the key words that they come out with. And then I'd get them to, when they're finished speaking about it, I get them to identify another golden moment. And I do that 5 or 6 times, depending on their level of interest and engagement and the richness of what came through in the first few. Because what the outcome from the exercise is, you get somebody to write a statement, which is, my why is, or my purpose in life, or my purpose in business is, because you can contextualize it either in life or in business. So I would normally do in business, or what's meaningful for me in life or in business is. So you contextualize this, as I said earlier. So here's, and then I would frequently having written down what they'd said, I would turn the pages back around towards them and leave the pages on the table in front of us and get them to read through my notes and then say, so what stands out for you? And that's where they get to a meaningful construct. And so here we go. So I'd just like you to take a second and again, just allow yourself relax. You might want to close your eyes, but get in touch with your body again. Feel your body against the stool or chair that you're in, or if you're standing, feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breathing. Allow yourself to slow down a bit. What I'd like you to do is to identify a golden moment, a moment where your actual lived experience of life intersected with that sense of meaning. What age were you? Where were you? What were you doing? What or who else was present? As you look back on this moment, What does it make you feel? As you look back on this moment, what in there, in that experience, is either meaningful to you or sheds light, gives some sense of purpose? And you might want to make a few notes as to whatever came for you so that you get what that is. And when I'm doing this with people, I would write the where it was and who they were with and what else was present and those kind of extraneous things down, because it really, if they look through the notes again in the future, it's very, very helpful. But obviously what we're looking for. And then let's just take another second. What I'd like you to do is just let that golden moment go, and maybe deliberately in a different stage in your life, see if you could identify another golden moment. Where were you? What were you doing? Who or what else was there? What were you feeling? And as you look back on it, what does it make you feel now? And what can you take from that that's about your purpose or is meaningful for you? So I'll give you another couple of seconds. I went to the second one because I'm hoping that what, for at least some of you have seen, is there could be some connection between the two. There could be an emerging pattern. And so maybe you can begin to see that if you did that 4, 5, 6 times, you could get quite a rich tapestry that begins to show you something of value and use. And the exercise then ends with some kind of a statement. You know, if you like the Simon Sinek notion of why, and that everybody has a why, then it might emerge as the sentence might emerge as what your why is, or what your purpose in life or your purpose in business or what's meaningful for you is. But it's useful to have that sentence, that mantra, because that is something that you can call on to keep you motivated, to persist in achieving something over time. So that's an exercise that's about coaching for meaning and purpose. I'm just going to, there's one more place I'm going to take you, which is quite different in nature. And this is in support of the idea that will is a bit like a muscle that you can make stronger through practice. And again, this comes very much from the work of Assagioli, psychosynthesis. So it's an exercise that you might find a psychosynthesis guide using. And they're kind of meditations or drills even. But the purpose of all of these, I'm going to give you a list. And the purpose of all of them is to help you develop will on a day-to-day basis. Because I think the other thing that I'm learning as I get back into the world of executive coaching and working with people, business coaching, leader performance coaching, that I'm being much more supportive. I remember somebody years ago asking me, Miles, that's great. What happens between the coaching sessions? And I thought, well, you know, these are senior people. They have, you know, they have integrity. They have willpower. They'll go and enact what they've taken from it. But in retrospect, I'm not sure how much I was helping people feel good and how much I was actually helping people change behavior. So one of the things that's creeping more and more into my work is about, I said I introduced mindset earlier as it being the kind of the place where the rubber hits the road. So helping people with mindset. And then also, this is another place where I've done this with one person recently, and it was just great fun. And here it is. It's a list. So developing will. So I'm using developing will. You can develop your will. It's not a fixed quotient. Do something you've never done before. Perform an act that demands courage. Make a plan and then follow it, big or small. Repeat small but fruitful activities every day for a week. So, even if that's a stretching exercise in the morning, a meditation exercise, writing an action list for the day, it doesn't matter, but do it every day for a week. Break a habit. It's another exercise of will. Keep doing something you are doing for 5 more minutes. So you run out of steam, you run out of energy, you run out of interest. No. Take it for another 5 minutes and see what happens. So I do that one more and more, because what I find out is that I've forgotten something, or there's a new thought, or there's something else that occurs that's of value, often sets me up for the next day's work. Say no when it's right to say no, but easier to say yes. That's another act of will. Behave independently of what other people might think or say. That's back to will and autonomy. Carry out an action with complete attention and intensity, as if it were your last. So I can only hit tennis balls at the moment once a week. So when I get onto the court with Ben, my coach, it's Ben, I've been thinking that what we should focus on today is, let's get warmed up and find my rhythm. Then let's make sure that the backhand is technically happy. And then we really need to put most of today's session on my serve. And then for the last 10 minutes, we'll just play out some points. So I do some of that. So I'm trying to divide my hour into little bits that I can take a breath and bring full attention to it. And I only just realized in speaking that it's partly driven by a discipline that my doctor gave me, which is, I don't know if you can see that. That is a cooker timer. It's an apple. It's called the Pomodoro technique, and the guy who invented it wrote a book about it. You don't need to buy the book; you just need to buy this. And because he was a student, and he found that it was really difficult to get focused. So what he started doing was, he said, what I'll do is I'll just give myself very short spaces of time and make a promise myself, identify an activity for that time, and just do that activity. And that became known as a Pomodoro. What he worked out was that 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes break was the best thing. So you assign, and it's really interesting. When I do it, when I'm writing or whatever else, and an email comes up, I don't answer the email, because I made a promise to myself that for this Pomodoro, this 25 minutes, I will just focus on writing. So it's an incredibly useful technique, dividing things into smaller bits so that you bring your full attention to it. Boom. That was, so that's just, that list came out of a book called What We May Be by Piero Ferrucci. It's a really, if you enjoy the exercises that I've attributed to psychosynthesis, Piero's book is full of wonderful visualizations and exercises that you can do with your clients or with yourself. I've in the past, I've recorded some of the exercises so that I can play them back and engage with them without my coach present. So really great book, powerful stuff. And then very lastly, just to kind of put a pitch in, I'm in here in West London in a local tennis center. We'll be doing a one-day in-person, so it's going to be a proper workshop. Learn how to enable flow in yourself, the coach, enable flow in the other person, the player. Those are the two principles. We'll do that by standing in this most amazing laboratory called a tennis court. It's a great laboratory because if you change your attention, your mindset, you see the result immediately in the behavior and in where the ball lands. So it really is a laboratory in which you can run experiments. No level of fitness is required. No interest in sport is required. The fascination is, in fact, it's people who hate tennis or any sport who get the most fun, because actually they discover that part of themselves that actually quite likes moving, and being asked to coach somebody in a discipline about which you know next to nothing, so you're only reliant on their capacity to learn, is profound in terms of consolidating your skills. So this is a skill building workshop that's about excellence. So I'm not going to say any more about that. I'm going to stop the screen share and be here for any questions or observations you might have. That's gone. So great. Either unmute yourself and ask a question. Type it up a bit of it into chat, because I can now read it properly. Or go and make yourself a cup of tea, whichever is your preference. So if anybody's leaving, just a huge thanks for staying the course, for engaging in that. And if you want the slides, let us know. Send us an email, either miles@milesdowney or inquiries@milesdowney, whatever you've got, and we'll send you the link to the recording, and also we'll send you the slides so you can have them for your own use. Any thoughts, observations, questions?
Can I ask a question, Miles? It's Rupert. The
Rupert.
Pomodoro technique. I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
But the there you go. You prepared.
Yeah. I've thrown out all my books. I only keep 4 or 5 now.
Is it? You said the optimum was 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest. I had it in my head that it varied from person to person.
Yeah. So that's what he says in his book. And I find that I like to do a bit more of that. But also, I'm managing a hip situation and a more attendance situation. So what happens is that actually sitting down is really bad for me. So, so I'm getting an extra hit as an older person and that's why my doctor gave it to me. So I've heard that the time that the human being can concentrate is anywhere between 20 and 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Usefully, and then you take a break. So I thank you for the clarification. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm coaching somebody this morning who'd accidentally tumbled over the technique because his watch beeped every hour and told him to move around, at which point he was going off and wandering around the office for 10 minutes and talking to his team.
Oh, brilliant.
And then working for 50 minutes. And he got it in his head that was bad. And so we spent quite a lot of time talking on it. But this, I'll send him a note later and back this up as well. That's great. Thank you.
They're great. And actually, the additional piece you threw in there is something that I learned about when working inside an entrepreneurial startup, is that one of the rules of a startup, and it's a really good rule that goes beyond it, is that one of the jobs of the leader of a whole thing or a department is to make sure that everybody knows what the primary business objective is. And you do that by walking around the office and asking people, how does what you're doing on your desk, how does that up to our primary business objective? Because if it doesn't, do something else.
Yeah, that was the other part of the session. So we covered everything. Yeah, I was on it today, wasn't I?
Yeah, really.
Cool.
Thank you. And other questions, observations, or just random thoughts?
Hi, Miles. Sorry, whoever that was, you carry on. I'll go next.
Davil, that was you, I think, was it? Was that you?
That was probably, maybe. Yeah, I wanted to say something, but I heard someone else who started to speak. Yeah. If I can just share, I'm a big fan of Pomodoro as well. And I try to use it when I can. And what I've noticed is actually when I set, for me, it's usually 20 or 30 minutes. It depends. But I usually do it longer, even though when I hear I use it on the phone. I put my phone on airplane mode, so I'm not disturbed, and I actually do even longer. For me, it goes up to 40 minutes, 50, sometimes even to an hour. So when I see that I have results, it's working, I really love it.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at the list of developing will, I couldn't stop smiling because I had the impression that it's like my thoughts are put into words. It's actually what I'm trying to do now. So I was wowed about that. And actually what kind of promise I made to myself lately, that every day I would do something, at least even the smallest steps that bring me closer to my goal. Actually, that keeps me on my direction of travel. And I see, like, even if it's smallest thing that day, but it needs to get me closer to that. And I find it very effective.
Yeah, that fits into our list of activities that for developing will. Great, I do the same thing. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lawrence, you were going to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, thanks very much, Miles. Really interesting. Well, one thing that struck me was that, I mean, I've got clients, who, like, as everybody has, I'm sure, who are right across the range of motivated. And I think what suddenly struck me was that I'd separated them into motivated and not motivated. I think all of them, even the most committed, could do with more. So I'm going to sort of build some of this. I found that visualization stunningly more effective than I expected. So I'm going to build that in regularly now, but with all of them. Even the motivated ones have got a lot more to give, I know. So absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Miles.
No, that's brilliant to hear. Yeah, great. Thank you. Other thoughts?
Good evening. Thank you for your masterclass. My name is Deichka Diana. I am 14 years old. I'm Ukrainian, and I am partner and leader Grant Advance in I Am Leader School. I am professional gymnast and young coach. And together with Valentina Melnik and our coach team, we do charity classes for Ukrainians. And if it's really possible for you to hold a charity masterclass for Ukrainians. Thank you so much for your masterclass. It was really emotional and
yeah, I have a relationship with Master Coach Ukraine for many years. So I just need to check conflict of interest, but the answer is of course yes. Let's catch up outside of here.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Great. Thank you for being here, given the hell that your country is going through. Any other thoughts, observations, questions?
Well, thanks so much. I'm going to duck out, but thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll see you again before too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, Hans.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll call it close there. Thank you so much for your time. Please, if there's anything I can help with, just send an email. I'm always up to responding and being helpful and building the relationships that we've got. Thank you so much for coming. Old faces. I see Liz McCann there. Ian Kinnery. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.